We do have breaking news. Kentucky State Police have confirmed that the missing 8-month-old Miya Rudd has been found.
She entered the world with a simple wish for love, warmth, and a safe place to grow. But her journey wasn't easy. Life presented quiet challenges from the very beginning, gently shaping her story in ways no one could predict. Her early days were filled with moments where comfort felt distant and connection seemed just out of reach. She grew up in a home where challenges were part of daily life, where daily stress sometimes dimmed the bright moments all children deserve. Yet even in the midst of uncertainty, her spirit quietly hoped for understanding, for care, for someone to notice the light within her. This is Miya's story, a reminder of why every child deserves a nurturing, supportive beginning. Miya was born into a family facing many of life's toughest hurdles. She was only 8 months old, barely starting to sit up, still reaching out with tiny hands, hoping someone would reach back. Her parents, Tesla and Cage, were not without love, but life had become complicated. They faced stressors that made it hard to create the stability every child needs. Their household was full. 3 older children shared the space, each with their own needs and quiet hopes. The home wasn't always calm. At times it missed the little routines, like shared meals or quiet moments, that helped children feel grounded and safe. Tesla and Cage were doing their best in circumstances that stretched them thin. They were navigating pressures that many families face: economic hardship, instability, and emotional strain. In navigating their own challenges, being consistently present became more difficult. Their home wasn't a sanctuary, it was a storm, a place where lullabies were replaced by shouting, where meals were missed, and warmth came only from chance. Her mother, Tesla, and father, Cage, were both lost to addiction, trapped in a world of meth, fentanyl, and escape. They weren't evil, but they were broken, deeply and tragically broken, and their brokenness left no room for parenting. They didn't just lose their way, they lost the chance to be the parents their children desperately needed. And while the outside world took Miya's siblings away for protection, somehow she was left behind, the tiniest, most vulnerable one of all. She stayed in the chaos, in the neglect, in the silence, and she waited for a hand to hold, for a voice to sing her name with love. But no one came. For every woman who has ever rocked a baby, kissed a forehead, or felt that fierce, protective ache in her chest, Miya's story is one that doesn't just hurt, it haunts. Tesla and Cage once came together as 2 young people, full of dreams and hope, bound by love. They met when they were still figuring out who they were, both searching for something to hold on to. But addiction and unresolved pain soon overshadowed the love they shared. They couldn't escape the weight of their demons. When they married, they hoped their love would be enough to overcome their struggles. But love, tangled with addiction, was never enough. They lived in Reynolds Station, Kentucky, a small town where life could feel slow, but problems like theirs were no secret. Their first children arrived, born into a relationship already crumbling beneath the pressure of their issues. But Miya, their 4th child, arrived when the cracks finally became impossible to ignore. While the older siblings felt the sting of neglect, Miya was born into a home where love was buried beneath brokenness and chaos. But before we begin, I just want to say thank you to my amazing viewers and subscribers. Your support through likes, shares, and comments means the world to me. Your engagement helps make these stories even more meaningful. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts. Neighbors later said they once saw Cage and Tesla as a family with potential. Tesla, once a nurturing mother, had dreams of giving her children everything, but addiction pulled her away from that vision. Cage, quick-tempered and controlling, seemed to love deeply, but he couldn't love himself or anyone else properly. Neighbors saw the changes. At first, they whispered about the constant fighting, the shouting matches, the slammed doors, and the long silences. Then they noticed the absence, how Tesla disappeared into herself, leaving her children to fend for themselves. Miya, the baby, should have been wrapped in warmth and love, but she too often went without the comforting arms of a mother or the safety of a father's care. Her parents got lost in a world that had no place for her fragile innocence. People might wonder what went wrong, blame addiction or instability, But for any woman who has ever loved and protected her children, the truth is simple. Sometimes those who should protect them, the people who should protect them, are the ones who fail them most. In a family torn apart by addiction and neglect, each person's actions rippled through Miya's life, deepening her pain in ways she could never understand. Cage, Miya's father, spent his life in and out of trouble. He didn't just lose himself to addiction, he faced multiple arrests for drug charges, including possession and distribution. His criminal history showed how little control he had over his own life. Though he received opportunities to turn his life around, addiction pulled him back into the same destructive cycle. For Miya, the young child caught in the middle, it wasn't just her father's absence. It was the instability he left in his wake. Ricky Smith, Cage's father, carried a troubled past too, though his criminal history focused more on violence and assault charges. Ricky had a notorious temper. His actions mirrored the instability running through his family, but even with his violent tendencies, he wasn't around much. When he was, his presence added more turmoil to the already chaotic home. The children grew up too fast, learning the world was full of danger, not protection. On the other side, David Tucker, Miya's maternal grandfather, struggled with his own criminal history, specifically tied to theft and drug-related offenses. His issues with the law ran deep, but he never faced any real consequences for the harm he caused. As for Thetha Tucker, Miya's maternal grandmother, her failure to provide proper care for Miya matched the criminal history she carried. She had a history filled with addiction and poor decisions, which left her incapable of offering the love Miya needed. Miya's family, both paternal and maternal, plunged deep into a world of criminal behavior and neglect. Billy Smith, Miya's paternal grandmother, carried the same shadows. Her history with drug abuse and unresolved trauma remained hidden, but her neglect and failure to intervene in Miya's care made her complicit. In a family where every generation struggled with their own demons, Miya suffered the consequences. It wasn't just that her parents were addicts or criminals. It was that every single person who could have helped, who could have offered her a safer world, chose to ignore her.
When Miya was born, her body already carried the weight of the world she was entering. Doctors tested her umbilical cord and found methamphetamine in her system. A loud and immediate warning that this child wasn't safe. Social workers received that report and flagged Miya's case right away. They knew her parents, Tesla Tucker and Cage Rudd, had a long history of addiction and criminal behavior. The Cabinet for Health and Family Services, CHFS, opened a case, and a social worker prepared to remove Miya from their custody. But when they tried to follow up, the system fell apart. Social services couldn't locate Tesla and Cage. The couple moved frequently, changed addresses, and often disappeared from contact. Despite the urgency, CHFS didn't escalate their efforts. They didn't issue emergency protective custody. They didn't request law enforcement assistance to track the family down. They simply closed the file, marking her as unable to locate. And just like that, Miya slipped through the cracks. Paperwork piled up and the system treated her case like routine, not urgent. No one followed up with family members. No one checked in at local hospitals or confirmed her safety through medical visits. Despite knowing that her two older siblings had already been removed from the home, CHFS left Miya behind, unprotected, unheard, and unseen. It wasn't a single person who failed her. It was a system built to protect children that failed to act when it mattered most. And because of that failure, Miya spent her short life in the very environment she should have been rescued from. Brody Payne moved into the Rudd home and stayed there for nearly 6 months. He didn't hide who he was. He ran a drug operation straight out of the house. He used the U.S. Postal Service to ship meth and turned their home into a trafficking hub. Tesla Tucker and Cage Rudd let him in. They knew he was moving drugs. They watched the packages arrive. They saw the people come and go, and they still kept the door open. They didn't just tolerate it, they enabled it. They had an 8-month-old baby living there. They chose to keep Payne around anyway. They let him sleep just steps away from Miya, in the same space where drugs, cash, and chaos filled the air. They didn't put her safety first. They put their loyalty to addiction, to criminal behavior, to silence above her life. Instead of protecting their daughter, they invited danger into her world. They didn't stop Payne. They supported him, even as he used their home to poison other families. Neighbors noticed the red flags, strangers at odd hours, loud arguments, fear lingering in the air. But no one intervened. And inside that house, while adults chased highs and money, Miya waited for someone to see her. Payne didn't act alone. He thrived because the Rudd family led him. Their silence gave him cover. Their choices put Miya in harm's way every single day. And in the end, when the truth came out, it was too late. The warning signs didn't start with Miya. Before she was even born, the state had already flagged the Rudd household as dangerous. In 2022, officials tested the hair of the two older children, and the results came back positive for methamphetamine. That meant the kids weren't just living around drugs. They were breathing it in, touching it, and carrying it in their bodies. Someone exposed them to meth consistently and carelessly. They weren't safe, and the state knew it. Social workers from Kentucky's Cabinet for Health and Family Services stepped in. They didn't wait. They removed the older children from the home and placed them in protective custody. That decision saved those kids from further exposure, but it also raised a massive red flag. This home was unfit for any child, and still, when Miya was born, the system let her stay. Officials had every reason to believe she would face the same risks. Her siblings had already tested positive. The home hadn't changed, but instead of removing her at birth, the state opened a case and let it drift.
In early 2024, Kentucky launched a bold initiative called Operation Summer Heat. State leaders didn't wait any longer. They recognized the drug crisis had reached a breaking point, and they took action. Communities were suffering. Children were growing up in meth labs. Fentanyl, meth, and other deadly substances had flooded small towns, leaving tragedy behind every doorstep. In homes like the Rudd families, addiction had taken root, and babies like Miya were left to grow up in danger. So the state mobilized quickly. Kentucky State Police, along with federal and local agencies, rolled out coordinated raids across counties. They weren't just arresting low-level users. They targeted major drug traffickers, home-based operations, and entire supply chains. During the crackdown, authorities arrested over 200 people. They seized weapons, drugs, and trafficking evidence across the state. In total, they confiscated illegal contraband worth $684,953.50, a staggering amount that revealed just how deeply drugs had saturated Kentucky's communities. But they didn't just uncover narcotics, they uncovered broken homes and neglected children too. Despite the force of Operation Summer Heat, Tesla Tucker, Cage Rudd, Ricky Smith, and Brody Payne slipped through the cracks. While authorities swept across Kentucky, arresting over 200 people and seizing nearly $685,000 in illegal drugs, the Rudd household hid in plain sight. They didn't make noise. They didn't draw crowds. They kept their world small, just one rural home in Reynolds Station, quietly falling apart. For nearly 6 months, Brody Payne lived inside that house, trafficking meth and fentanyl through the U.S. Postal Service, right under the radar. He ran his operation behind closed doors, while an 8-month-old baby lived just rooms away. But on May 20th, 2024, everything changed. Kentucky State Police arrested Payne at the Rudd residence. Inside the home, they found half a pound of meth and 3/4 of a pound of fentanyl-laced pills. The drugs weren't hidden well. They were part of the house, part of daily life. That arrest sparked new suspicion. Why was Payne living there? Where were the children? And, most urgently, where was baby Miya? 3 weeks later, on June 15, 2024, state police returned to the Rudd home with a search warrant. This time, they weren't just looking for drugs, they were looking for answers. After Kentucky State Police arrested Brody Payne on May 20th, 2024, and discovered drugs at the Rudd residence, their suspicions about the household grew stronger. Payne's drug trafficking operation, which used the U.S. Postal Service to transport methamphetamine and fentanyl, raised red flags. But the police still hadn't located baby Miya. Authorities were already on edge, questioning what had happened to her. Then, on May 30th, 2024, a call came in. It wasn't from anyone inside the Rudd household. It was from Alexis Stinnett, Miya's aunt. Alexis had been concerned for some time. She hadn't seen Miya for weeks, and when she asked her sister Tesla Tucker about the baby, the answer didn't add up. Tesla claimed that Child Protective Services had taken Miya, but Alexis felt something was wrong. She wasn't about to let her niece disappear into the shadows, so she called law enforcement, asking them to perform a welfare check on the child. The call opened a door. Law enforcement took immediate action. They returned to the Rudd household and began searching in earnest. What they found stunned even seasoned officers. In the front room, inside a duffel bag, they found the decomposed remains of 8-month-old Miya Rudd. The house had become more than a drug hub. It had become a silent grave. However, it wasn't until June 15, 2024, that law enforcement made a shocking discovery that connected Brody Payne to Miya's tragic fate. During a search of the Rudd residence, police found the decomposed remains of Miya in a duffel bag. This prompted a deeper look into the circumstances of her death. Investigators pieced together the timeline and discovered that Payne was part of the larger story of neglect and criminal activity surrounding the Rudd household. Brody Payne, while living with the family, was involved in trafficking drugs right under their roof. He had played a role in hiding illegal activities, possibly even influencing the conditions in which Miya lived. On June 20th, 2024, authorities arrested Tesla, Cage, and Ricky. However, before their arrests, Tesla and Cage had been hiding out at a motel in Owensboro, approximately 25 miles west of Reynolds Station. The couple had escaped the immediate spotlight, but authorities eventually tracked them down after they were found in possession of methamphetamine and fentanyl. Their evasive answers regarding Miya's whereabouts only raised suspicions further.
Since the investigation into Miya Rudd's tragic fate had been launched, law enforcement had already been looking for Billie J. Smith, Miya's maternal grandmother. She wasn't just a concerned relative, she was another thread in the web of dysfunction, addiction, and neglect that surrounded the little girl's life. Detectives finally tracked Billie down on June 9th, 2024, during a welfare check at a residence in Reynolds Station, Kentucky. This wasn't just a routine questioning. Billie had an outstanding warrant stemming from a second-degree assault, domestic violence case in Davis County back in October 2023. Her arrest wasn't connected directly to Miya's death, but in a story full of missed chances and ignored warning signs, it was yet another failure of responsibility in Miya's circle. And just when it seemed like the scene couldn't get more chaotic, another person came into the spotlight: Timothy L. Roach, a 37-year-old man from Owensboro. While troopers were carrying out the welfare check, they spotted Roach trying to discreetly discard unprescribed Suboxone under his vehicle. That one careless move landed him in custody, too. Authorities arrested him on charges of possession of a controlled substance and possession of a prescription drug not in its proper container. Though Billie Smith didn't give any information about Miya's whereabouts at the time of her arrest, her silence spoke volumes. Like so many others in this case, she stood in the shadows of truth, close enough to know but never stepping forward to protect the child who needed it most. Now, law enforcement turned their focus toward Miya's maternal grandparents, David and Talitha Tucker. Investigators suspected they might have played a role, or at least held critical information, about the little girl's tragic death. With growing pressure to find answers, Kentucky State Police arrived at their Owensboro home on June 12, 2024, armed with a search warrant. Troopers searched the property located on Leachfield Road, hoping to find clues that could lead to Miya. They seized electronic devices, combed through the house, and questioned both David and Talitha. When asked where Miya was, they claimed they didn't know. Their denial didn't clear them. Instead, it raised even more questions. Although officers didn't recover direct evidence connected to Miya's death, they arrested both grandparents on unrelated charges. Police arrested Talitha Tucker as a fugitive from Indiana, where she faced theft and fraud charges. Authorities also took David Tucker into custody for unpaid court fines tied to an old non-payment warrant out of Davis County. At the time, the couple had been caring for Miya's 3 older siblings, since Child Protective Services had already removed them from the custody of Miya's parents, Tesla and Cage. But after arresting the Tuckers, officials from the Cabinet for Community-Based Services quickly stepped in and relocated the siblings to ensure their safety.
When investigators stepped inside the Rudd residence in Reynolds Station, inside they found the decomposed remains of an infant. Her tiny body, once full of life, once held in someone's arms, was now hidden away like a secret, not buried with dignity, not mourned properly, just stuffed into a bag, left in a room that reeked of neglect, addiction, and everything a child should never know. How could a parent do this to their own child? How do you look into the eyes of a baby who trusts you completely and still choose the needle? Still choose the high? Still choose silence over a scream and a lie over the truth? It breaks something deep inside to think about it. A child doesn't ask for much, just to be fed, to be held, to be safe. That's it. And yet this little girl got none of that. She was born into a family that should have protected her, loved her fiercely, chosen her above all else. But instead, they turned away. The investigation finally reached a heartbreaking conclusion on January 8, 2025, when the state released Miya's final autopsy report. Investigators studied every detail. Medical examiners worked with what little they had, but the condition of her tiny body made it nearly impossible to pinpoint exactly how she died. They couldn't declare a cause of death. Her remains were too far gone. But they did find something else, something that left no room for doubt. They found 23.3 nanograms per milliliter of methamphetamine in her system. That's how much of that toxic drug coursed through the body of an 8-month-old baby. That alone told them everything they needed to know. Despite the undetermined cause, detectives and prosecutors classified her death as a homicide. They saw the home she lived in. They uncovered the bag she was stuffed into. They saw the conditions, what she inhaled, what surrounded her, and what she never had a chance to escape. Miya didn't die peacefully. She died in pain. She died in silence. She died surrounded by people who were supposed to protect her and instead poisoned her. Tesla Tucker, Cage Rudd, Ricky Smith, and Brody Payne faced the consequences of their actions in the death of 8-month-old Miya Rudd. The truth came crashing down on them, a truth they could no longer escape. Tesla Tucker, Miya's mother, was arrested and charged with murder, child abuse, and abuse of a corpse. She had spent months hiding from the reality of her choices, but the weight of those choices finally caught up with her. In September 2024, she was sentenced to 1 year in Davis County for unrelated drug charges, but this was just the start of her legal troubles. Cage Rudd, Miya's father, stood beside her in court, facing the same charges. They shared responsibility for the heartbreaking neglect of their daughter. No matter what they said or did, nothing could undo the pain they caused. Ricky Smith, Miya's grandfather, had been the one to care for her. He should have protected her, but instead, he failed her. Now he faced the same charges as his son, and there would be no escaping his involvement in Miya's tragic death. Brody Payne, a family acquaintance, was just as responsible for Miya's fate. His connection to the family and his participation in the destructive cycle of drugs and abuse led to her death. He couldn't run from it anymore. Tesla, Cage, Ricky, and Brody, 4 names that now carry the weight of a baby girl's stolen future. In January 2025, a grand jury indicted all 4 for the murder of 8-month-old Miya Rudd. They didn't walk free. Officers took them into custody and locked them behind bars, where they've remained ever since, waiting to face the justice Miya never got in life. By January 22, 2025, prosecutors hit her, Cage Rudd, Miya's father, Ricky Smith, her grandfather, and Brody Payne, a family acquaintance, with heavy charges, murder, and 3 counts of first-degree criminal abuse of a child under 12. None of them admitted guilt. Each one pleaded not guilty in court. But the evidence, Miya's remains found stuffed inside a duffel bag, meth in her bloodstream, and a home reeking of addiction, spoke volumes. Their legal troubles didn't end with the murder charge. Authorities also charged them with abuse of a corpse, tampering with physical evidence, failure to report a death engaging in organized crime, drug trafficking, firearm possession. Even more, Ricky, Brody, and Cage faced extra charges for being convicted felons in possession of handguns. And Smith, prosecutors labeled him a persistent felony offender, which could land him even more time behind bars. Their next court hearing was scheduled for March 4th, 2025. Until then, they sat in jail, not as parents, not as caretakers, but as defendants in one of Kentucky's most heart-wrenching cases.
After Miya Rudd's heartbreaking death, Kentucky's Office of the Ombudsman tried to investigate how the system failed her, but they ran into a wall. The TWIST system, a database meant to track cases of child abuse and neglect, locked them out. Lawmakers had designed to hold sensitive child welfare records, but they limited access to only a few agencies. That meant the very office responsible for oversight couldn't review Miya's case. The ombudsman pushed for access, but state law stood in the way. Governor Andy Beshear's administration acknowledged the flaw, but they said the law would need to change first. Meanwhile, the auditor's office, which had taken over the ombudsman's duties, couldn't investigate the failures that led to Miya's death. Because of that, no one in oversight saw the full picture. No one held the system accountable in time to save her. Miya slipped through the cracks, not just because of her family, but because the people meant to protect her couldn't connect the dots. Her case forced Kentucky to face a painful truth. Without access and transparency, justice for children like Miya comes too late.
After Miya Rudd's tragic death, lawmakers in Kentucky took action. Representatives Myron Dossett and Scott Lewis introduced House Bill, calling it Baby Miya's Law. They wanted to make sure no child like Miya ever slipped through the cracks again. The bill aimed to change the law. It said that anyone who knew a baby was born to parents who had already lost custody of other children because of abuse or neglect must report it. Once reported, the law would trigger an automatic presumption that the child was in immediate danger. The Cabinet for Health and Family Services would then have to investigate and consider emergency custody. On February 20th, 2025, the bill passed its first big test. The House Families and Children Committee approved it and sent it forward. But just one day later, on February 21st, lawmakers reassigned the bill to the House Appropriations and Revenue Committee, putting its future in limbo. So far, lawmakers haven't passed Baby Miya's law, but her story continues to echo through the halls of Kentucky's Capitol. Her name now stands as a powerful call to action, a reminder that the law must do better for children who can't protect themselves. Miya never got the chance to grow up, to laugh freely, or to feel safe in her mother's arms. But her story lit a fire across an entire state. It exposed the cracks in a system meant to protect the innocent. It revealed how silence, neglect, and generational cycles of abuse can swallow a child whole. And now her name carries more than sorrow. It carries purpose. If justice means anything, it's not just about who gets punished, it's about who gets protected next. Miya's voice was stolen, but if we truly listen now, maybe we can make sure no child is ever unheard again.